Hey guys, welcome back to INS's Artistic Pursuits. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this cute mini backpack keychain, which you can hang in your bag or your pant loop. You can carry your cards in it, some cosmetics, name it, you can carry it. It's about 3.5 inches high and 3 inches wide. It comfortably fits your cards and other things. You can see that it's quite wide on the inside as well, and we've also made space so this bag can actually expand if you did want it to. But it's a very easy make. It's very easy for you to follow, and I have tried not to add too many sewing ons. We've actually attached these straps in the bottom when we're making this bag itself without sewing it, and we've attached the strap and the flap together when we're sewing just the flap on, so we've sewed them all together in one go. I've tried to make it as easy and less fidgety as possible. So yeah, it's a very easy and quick project to do, and a very cute one, especially since summer is in right around the corner. It is a very cute thing to carry on, and you don't want to carry bulky bags, so this cute little thing can actually amp up your outfit. So now just grab your things and let's get started. I have a 1.75 mm yarn. I'm using a 3 mm hook, a tapestry needle. I'm using this swivel lobster clasp for the keychain so that I can attach my pouch to this. I'm having a 2 cm magnet button. You can choose to use these, or you can use those clip-on magnet buttons or any other buttons to secure your flap to the bag. I have some stitch markers and a pair of scissors. First and foremost, we will start this bag by making the back straps for the backpack. So for that, we'll start with a slip knot, and I'm going to make 49 working chains. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a total of 49 working chains. So that is my long string of 49 chains. Now we make one additional chain that doesn't count as a stitch, it's just our turning chain. And now into the second chain from the hook, we are going to make a single crochet. So into that chain, I'm going to work into these back bumps so that I have a chain on the reverse side of the single crochet and it'll look neat. So into that second chain from the hook, into this back bump, I'm just going to insert my hook there, pull up a loop and make my single crochet. I'm going to make, that's my first single crochet, and I'm going to make 23 more single crochets. So I should have a total of 24 single crochets. And since our chain is 49 stitches long, the 25th stitch is the center stitch of our string. And in that center stitch, we will have an increase. We'll have a few additional stitches in there. So first make a total of 24 single crochets, and we will work the 25th chain space together. Once you worked 24 single crochets, this is how your work should look. Now you will be there here on the 25th stitch. In this stitch, we are going to make 3 single crochets in that same chain. So I'm just going to go under that loop of that chain, pull up a loop, make 1 single crochet. I'm going to go back into that same stitch one more time, pull up a loop and make a second single crochet. I'm going to go back into that same stitch again and make a third single crochet. So now what this does is it creates this fold so that you have that fold on the top of that mini backpack to put your lobster clasp in there, so it'll just sit right snug in that fold. You can avoid that and make this a flat loop as well. It's up to you. I just think this small detail is quite cute. So now that we have 3 single crochets in that 25th stitch, into that following stitch we start making 1 single crochet each till we reach the end of that chain, you'll have 24 single crochets again. So I'll meet you guys back after you've completed this whole string. I have reached the end of my chain, and now I have 24 single crochets after this curve, and this is how your backpack strap should look. If you think you want it longer, of course you can make it longer. Just make sure you have odd number of stitches, and you make this cluster of stitches with 3 single crochets in that stitch in the center stitch. So now that is my strap. I'm going to fasten off and cut my yarn. I'm also going to weave in these tails. Make sure you weave in the tails right now, because once we start our backpack, we are going to, after the base, we are going to attach the lower part of the bag strap to the bag, so that we don't have to sew it on later. It just reduces additional work, and I hate sewing it on and putting knots in between my bags, so this kind of makes it much easier. So just make sure you've woven your tail in for the next bit. Keep this right close by. I will show you how to make the bag now. We'll first make the base of the bag. As per, we start with a slip knot, and we make sure that your slip knot is tight, and make 14 working chains. Now that is my 14 working chains. We make 1 additional chain that doesn't count as a stitch, it's our turning chain. Now we are going to work on either side of the chain. So I like to work on the back bumps first, and then I like to work into these stitches on the 2 loops on top of that chain. So into that second chain from the hook, we are going to make our single crochets. So we go into this back bump into that second chain from the hook, and we make our first single crochet. Now we make 1 single crochet into each of these stitches till we reach this last chain. So we will have a total of 14 single crochets. That is my 14 single crochets on my chain. And now in that last chain where we have that last single crochet, we make 4 more stitches. So we just go back into that same chain and pull up a loop and make 4 more single crochets. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 1 more, 4. So we should have a total of 5 single crochets in that last chain. So these stitches right there. Now just grab your stitch marker and mark the last stitch that we just made. That's the last single crochet, the 5th one, and mark the first single crochet in that corner stitch. So that's the 5th one, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and the 1st one. So we mark these 2 stitches. The 3 stitches in between, we've actually put these stitch markers so that we make regular stitches till the stitch marker, and these last 3 stitches is where we are going to increase in our next row. So now once we've done that, we will make 1 single crochet into each of the stitches till we reach this last stitch, the last chain. Actually, that's our foundation chain, so that's the last chain. After these 5 stitches, you should have 13 foundation chain spaces remaining. We'll make 13 single crochets in those stitches. Your next stitch might be slightly tight, just nudge your way in between and continue making 1 single crochet into each of those stitches till you reach the end of this row, this side. This stitch completes that last stitch for me. So after this stitch marker, this is my 13th stitch. Now if you notice, we have 3 stitches, a total of 5 stitches in that corner stitch, while we actually have only 2 stitches in this corner stitch. How to? The first stitch and the last stitch that we've made are both the same stitches as these stitches with a stitch marker. So those are already 2 and we need 3 more stitches. If you want, you can mark the first stitch because that is also the same as this first stitch mark over here, and you can mark the last stitch that we just made. So these are your two of the 5 stitches. Now we need 3 more stitches in between. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to make 2 more single crochets, and for the third single crochet I'm going to do something a little different. It is so that the rows it has a more seamless joint. We don't have to make a slip stitch, which kind of skews our work. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to that same stitch where we made our last single crochet and pull up a loop and make 1 single crochet and make 1 more single crochet. So now this brings us to 4 single crochets in that corner stitch. This one right here, this one, and these 2. So that's 4 single crochets. Now for the 5th single crochet, I'm just going to pull up my loop long. I'm going to remove the stitch marker from that first stitch. So this one right here. And now I'm going to insert my hook from behind that first stitch. So under both the loops of that first stitch, from behind to the front, like so. I'm going to grab this loop and I'm going to put it over my hook. Just make sure your working yarn is behind your work. Now you grab this loop that you've put over your needle and pull it to the back of your work. Now you can see that this has actually caused 2 loops to be formed in between both the stitches. Now that 2 loops is going to be considered a stitch. So now every stitch on top over here, like every stitch over here, has a V formation, and these are 2 loops. This 2 is going to be considered the same way. So now we tighten it enough. So now the length of this loop that we've just created with this by pulling this loop to the back, we are going to make this the same length as each of these stitches. So this is about right, and I'm also going to shorten this loop at the back. So I'm going to tighten it by pulling on my working yarn. And now grab your hook, insert it under both these loops that we just made, and pull this loop through those 2 loops and to the front of your work. Now this completes that row, the first row. Now for row number 2, we chain once. Now this chain is considered 1 stitch. This is actually our first stitch of the row. Now for the second stitch, we insert our hook. This is actually supposed to be that stitch where we had that stitch marker. So we make 1 single crochet into that stitch. That is the first stitch of the previous row. So that's our first single crochet, but the second stitch of this row. Now we make 1 single crochet into each of the stitches of the previous row till we reach this stitch marker. Once you reach the stitch marker, just pull the stitch marker out and make 1 single crochet. And you can get rid of the stitch markers later, but I will meet you guys back before I reach the stitch marker so I can show you what we do in the corner. I reached the stitch where I have the stitch marker, so I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out and I'm going to make 1 single crochet in that stitch where the stitch marker was there. Now we have the 3 stitches in between. I am going to make 2 single crochets into each of these 3 stitches. So we just go under both the loops of that stitch, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. I'm going to go back into that same stitch, pull up a loop and make the second single crochet in that same stitch. Now I'm going to do the same for the following 2 stitches. I'm going to make 2 single crochets into each of those stitches. So that's 1 and 1 more. And 2 single crochets into that 3rd stitch of that corner. So now if you see, we have 6 stitches in that corner. You don't need the stitch markers anymore. You can pull the stitch marker out. From this stitch marker onwards all the way to this stitch marker, we have 1 stitch per stitch. So we just go under this stitch and make 1 single crochet, and we go into the following stitch and make 1 single crochet. We make 1 single crochet into each of the stitches till we reach this stitch marker, and we do the second corner together. I have reached that stitch where I have the stitch marker. I'm just going to pull that stitch marker out and make 1 single crochet in that stitch where we had the stitch marker. Now we are supposed to make 2 stitches into the next 3 stitches, but our third stitch is a little different. For this corner, we are going to make 2 single crochets into the following 2 stitches only. So into that stitch right there, we go and make 2 single crochets into that same stitch like we did on the previous corner. Into the next stitch, I go back in and make 2 single crochets again. So that's 4. That's my 4 stitches of the corner. Now if you remember, before the single crochet we had this chain that I also said is our first stitch of the row. Now this stitch is part of the second curve. So now this is our first stitch, and we've made 4 single crochets, that is 2 single crochets into the stitches over here. So now we need 1 more stitch to make it 6. So now this time we go into that same loop, the loop that we went into, that we created with by going around, by taking the loops behind from the first stitch. So I'm going in under that loop, and I'll make 1 single crochet in that stitch there. Okay, so now this completes our corner. So now the base is completely done. We need to slip stitch. I'm not going to slip stitch. I'm just going to pull this loop up and insert my hook from, now this is that chain which we had made, the first chain, and now this right here, if you can see, is our first single crochet. So I'm just going to insert my hook from behind that single crochet to the front like so, put my loop over this hook and pull it to the back. Now that completes our base. Before we attach the strap to the backpack, we first need to identify which stitches we would like our backpack strap to be attached to. I know this is just 1 single crochet, but we are going to attach this strap to 2 stitches on our bag. So now that is going to be this first stitch and the second stitch. This is that stitch where we've just pulled this loop through. So that's the first stitch, and then a stitch after that. Now you count 10 stitches down. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and mark the 11th and the 12th stitch. So that's this one and this one right here. So now you will see that these stitch markers are actually the 14 flat stitches, and after this is where these curved stitches actually start. If you see, this is the 2 single crochets in 1 stitch, and these are all the single crochets. We are going to work only into the back loops of these rows, so if you would like, you can actually just mark the back loops of your work. Now, grab your backpack strap. I have woven my tails in, and if you're going to use a clasp like this where you cannot actually add it to the backpack after the opening is sewed, make sure you put it through and leave it there, because now we are going to attach these straps to the bag, and after which you will not have any place to put this loop, to put this clasp in. So now I've kept this, and just keep this right next to you. Face the wrong side of the bag flap towards you, and this is the correct side of how we're working. Now place this strap like so against, this is the correct side of the base, this is the correct side of the base, so I'm just placing my backpack strap on that piece. Now this, I'm keeping the correct side of my backpack strap to the base, correct side of the base of the bag. I'm going to pull this stitch marker out, and I'm going to put my stitch marker into these loops. So now you see that you have these side loops. You have 2 side loops on this side and you have 2 on this side. So I'm just going to grab my stitch marker and put it into both these loops right here on this side, and I'm going to attach it to the back loop of the next stitch, of that stitch where we had the stitch marker. I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out. I'm going to go into these 2 loops over here. These are the side loops of that stitch, and I'm going to mark it with that back loop of that next stitch. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So now just make sure that your strap is straight and it's not twisted. Now this is the correct side. This side is the correct side. This, I'm going to keep it flat against the back of the bag. I'm going to pull this stitch marker out. I'm going to go under both these loops of this side and into that back loop. I'm going to do the same on the other side, and I'm marking it. So now that is where your backpack straps will go. Now to start the next row. The next row, like I said earlier, we are only going to work into the back loops of the stitches. But when we are working into the back loops of the stitches, I do not like to work into only this loop. I actually like to go into this tiny vertical loop just below that back loop. So now if I were working into this stitch, into that back loop, I would go into the back loop and I would go into that stitch right there. Into that loop right there, which is the back of your work, and then make my stitch. So I'm going to do that. I'm just showing you that here because there are too many things going on over here, which will make it which may make it difficult for you to understand what I'm doing. So just make sure that I'm using both these loops, right? So now for the first stitch of this next row, since we are going to work only into the back loop of the other stitches, you'll notice that we have 2 loops over here. The loop that we just took around, so this one right here, this loop in the front will have 2 loops. In the previous row we went under both these loops, but since we are going to only work into the back loops of the other stitches, we will work into any one of these 2 loops. Just go under any one. It doesn't matter which one you go under, just go under any one of the loop, and we are going to pull this loop through to the front. So before we do that, we will tighten this loop, shorten that loop on the top, and make sure that the loops in the bottom are just the same width as the other stitches nearby. And now we go under any one of these loops. Any one is okay, so just go under one of the loops. I'm just going under the top one. Grab your loop and pull it through to the front. And now make a chain. So now this is the first stitch of your row. Now you can already see that it looks like it's worked only into the back loop. It'll be clearer when we go around. So now for the next stitch, I'm just going to pull my stitch markers out so that it's easier for you to see. Okay, because I do know the next stitch is where we have the stitch marker, and the stitch after that is where we have the stitch marker. I'm just going to pull it out so it's easy for me to show what I'm doing to you, and you don't have all that clunk in between. So now we had the stitch marker in between both these loops. So I'm just going to insert my needle into those 2 side loops, and I'm going to insert my hook into this back loop of the following stitch on the base of our bag. And like I said earlier, I'm also going to go into that loop at the back, which is this tiny loop at the back. If it's hard for you to get into, just grab a needle, push it in, pull your loop up, and then insert your hook into that. Now you grab your yarn, pull up a loop, and pull through all of the loops on your hook except one, and make your single crochet. So now this will start to secure your backpack's strap. Now go into that next, the stitch on the side. So this is the other one, the other side of that strap. I'm just going to go under both these loops of that strap, and I'm going to go into that back loop of the next stitch. I'm going to go under that and also go under that other loop at the back. Now you can see that you have 4 loops on your hook, 5 loops on your hook, and you just pull up a loop and pull through the first 4 loops. And now you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and make your single crochet. Now if you see, your backpack strap is secured to the base of the bag, and you didn't even have to sew it on, and you don't have to put any knots on, nothing. It works like a charm every time. I love to eliminate a lot of sewing when I do my work. It's because I hate tidying up after all the loose ends. So now this secures your strap. Now I go into the next stitch and just go into the back loop and that other loop in the bottom. You'll see that it's much easier when you're working your stitches. Usually the first stitch is the hardest, and I know I have I just attached this strap to that. It kind of made it harder, but just make sure it's worth the effort. Trust me, you don't want to have to sew that strap on and have the risk of it falling off later or anything like that. Now I'm just making 1 single crochet into each of these back loops, and along with the back loops obviously in these tiny loops at the back as well. So, and I'll make 1 single crochet till I reach this stitch over here. And like we attached this back strap, we're going to do the same. I'll meet you guys back and I'll show you how to do that quickly. We can work the other side as well together. Just completing that last single crochet before I reach that stitch marker over there. Now the next 2 stitches on the base of our bag is where we attach the backpack strap to. I am going to pull these stitch markers out. You do not have to, because I'm just doing that so that you don't have to see all this. It's already hard to see and you don't have to see too many things. Just make sure that your backpack strap is straight and it's not twisted in case you pull your stitch markers out, or even if you haven't, just make sure it's straight because you don't want to have to deal with that later. Now into the next stitches, like we did in the first 2 stitches, how we attach this, we can do exactly the same thing. We're just going to insert our hook into these side stitches like so first, and then we insert our hook into the back loop and the other tiny back loop under that back loop, yarn over, pull through the first 4 loops, yarn over and make our single crochet. We do that for the other side as well. It's very easy. It may look fidgety, but it's very, very easy. It's simply just placing your backpack strap to your base and sewing, crocheting all of them together. So now once I've done that, you can see that it's done. Now you can just let this hang. We don't do anything with this till we reach the till we almost complete the whole bag. Now we continue making 1 single crochet into each of the stitches till we reach that's tight. All right, so now we continue making 1 single crochet into the back loops only till we reach this first stitch over here. So now once you do that, you will have a total of 39 single crochets, excluding this first stitch. If you consider this chain as 1 stitch, and that is the first stitch, actually that will complete 40 stitches. So you have that 1 chain, and then you have 39 single crochets, which totals up to 40 stitches on this for this row. So now just go ahead and complete 1 single crochet into each of those back loops till you reach the end of this row. I'll meet you guys back once you reach the end of the row, and I'll show you how to slip stitch again, and then I'll show you what we do for next. Now this stitch right here is my last stitch of this row. Now that I've completed that stitch, this is that stitch where we had the chain. So now we are going to make that slip stitch that we've done all this time. So we are just going to pull this loop up long. We're going to skip this chain and we're going to go under the loops of that first single crochet. So that's the second stitch of the row. Just go under that loop, grab your loop, put it over your hook and pull this loop to the back of your work. Now tighten this loop just enough to make sure that it's the same size as the other stitches, and now tighten this loop. This time we go under both the loops that we have over here and pull this loop to the front of our work and make our chain. So now this is the first stitch of the next row. Now we will go under both the loops of the next stitch and make a single crochet. I'm going to make one single crochet into each of the stitches we're going to go under both the loops of the stitches, and we make one single crochet into each of the stitches and go all around, come back to this last stitch and slip stitch into this first single crochet. So we slip stitch over this chain over here. So we're going to keep doing this for a total of 17 rows. That's including the row that we've just started. I'm not counting the base row. That's row number, I'm not counting the row that we've completed together. That's the first row. Now we are on row number 2. I will meet you guys back after I complete row number 18. So for me, it's 18 rows. You can make however many rows you want. You can increase the number of rows, but just remember, if you have increased the number of rows, you may need to increase the strap for the backpack as well. So for me, because it's 18 rows, I have made 22 stitches on either side plus 5 stitches in between. I'm talking about the number of chains, so that's how I've considered it. So if you were making, say, 20 rows, just make sure you have 24 plus another 5. So that's how many stitches I've made. That's the rough number of stitches that I make. So however many rows you're going to make for your bag, that will depend on how high you want the bag to be. You can measure it, you can make a swatch and see how high you want it to be and make the bag strap accordingly. Yeah, so I'll meet you guys back once I've completed 18 rows. Just make sure that this back strap is not getting tangled in between your stitches. Just make sure it's on the other side and you continue working. We don't have to do anything with this for the first 18 rows. So that's row number 1 complete. We're on row number 2 and I'll meet you guys back after row number 18. As you can see, I've completed 18 rows. I haven't done the slip stitch yet, and this is how your pouch should look as of now. We'll attach this when we are sewing the flap onto the bag. So for now, this is how it should look. Now, to end this work, I'm going to leave a long tail so that I can weave the tail in later. First, I'm just going to cut this yarn out. You see, notice that it was just a loop. I just pulled it up loose and I cut the yarn and I've pulled that yarn out. Now, if you see, you'll have this thread coming out of that stitch instead of the loop. And we haven't done the slip stitch, so this is where the chain is, and that's the first stitch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this loop, and as we would if we were making a slip stitch, I'm just going to insert my hook at the back of that first stitch and grab this yarn and pull it to the back. And pull the whole yarn out. Now I'm going to pull this yarn back to the top and I'm going to insert my hook into that last stitch over there. So I'm going to so this was the first stitch. We've put our yarn through the first stitch. Now into this last stitch, I'm just going to insert my hook from the back in between those the two loops of that stitch. I'm just going to go in between that loop, grab my yarn and pull it through to the back. Now you can see that we have created a false stitch on top, which looks identical to the stitches, to the other stitches around it. So you will not know that we've actually ended our work over here. So now why I left this long tail is because I want to, I will use a tapestry needle to weave this end in, and the tapestry needle that I use is quite long. because I needed a tapestry needle with an eye, a long eye. So I'm just going to weave this yarn in. I prefer to grab a smaller needle first and pull it under this bump first, so that it sort of secures this yarn. It makes it tighter than it being loose. So under that stitch where we have that yarn, just pull this yarn through that loop at the back, and then like you would weave any other tail in, just weave this tail in between so that it's secure and it doesn't come undone. Now you can see that our stitch doesn't look like it's been worked with. I mean, it's been there's a slip stitch over there. It just looks very smooth on top. Before we go ahead to make our flap, we will mark the stitches that we are going to the stitches where we are actually going to fix the flap of the bag, of this pouch. So if you've made the stitches like I did and your stitches actually line up, then you will find that this stitch, the last stitch that we just made, where we made that false stitch to that false stitch to just end that row, mark that stitch. That counts as your first stitch, and we will mark the 16th stitch from this stitch. So if that's going to be your first stitch, and then you mark the 16th stitch on this side. So that's 1 2 3 4 5. So that is the 16th stitch. I'm just going to grab another stitch marker and put it down there. Now these two stitches are where the flap is going to actually sit. Now the corners, we'll have 4 stitches where we won't have anything, and we'll have 16 in front. So the width of the bag will be 4 stitches. It'll be 4 stitches wide. So that'll come on this corner, and it'll be like this, and our flap will sit on this 2 edges, and it'll go across to the front. So now that's how our flap is going to sit. In case your stitches are a little skewed and your 16 stitches from the start to the end do not line up, I'll tell you an easy way to figure it out. Now just keep your pouch flat, make sure the center is right. This is the base. Just press it down like so, flat. Okay, now once you press the bag flat, this actually creates the a division, so it kind of basically just folds your bag into half. Now if you didn't have this stitch, you can actually, I'm just going to pull the stitch markers out so it's easier for you to see. So now if you see, you will see that your bag actually folds in these 2 stitches right here, right? So now this 2 stitches where it folds here, so this is the back side of this bag, and the stitch which I have not marked is the front of the bag. We do the same on this side. Okay, so now this seems to be the back of the bag, and the rest seem to be the front of the bag. Now if you count the stitches from this stitch marker to this stitch marker, you should have a total of 20 stitches. So that's perfectly 20 stitches for me. So that's how you identify the back 20 stitches and the front 20 stitches. Now you skip the first 2 stitches, so the 20th stitch and the 18th stitch. 20th and the 19th, and you mark the 18th stitch over here, and then you pull the stitch marker out from here, and you skip the first stitch and the second stitch and mark the 3rd stitch over here. So now when you count the number of stitches in between, including the stitches where we have the stitch marker, you should have 16 stitches, and that will be the center 16 stitches of the back side of your bag, and it will fall perfectly in front. So whether your stitches are skewed or not, it wouldn't matter. This is the easiest way to find your stitches. So now let me show you how to make the flap of the bag. To make the flap of the bag, we'll start with a slip knot, and we will make 5 working chains. That's 1 2 3 4 and 5. Now we are going to work around this chain on both sides like we did for the base of the bag. We make one additional chain. Now that doesn't count as a stitch, it's just our turning chain. Now into the first 5 chains that we had made, we make 5 single crochets. So I'm just going to go into that second chain from the hook into that back bump, insert my hook, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. I'm just going to continue making 1 single crochet into each of the stitches. Now that stitch completes 5 single crochets. Now in this last chain where we have the 5th single crochet, we make 4 more single crochets. That's just so that we can make that semicircle curve. So that's after that 5th single crochet. This is the first additional single crochet. Now that's the second. Just third and fourth. So now we should have a total of 5 single crochets in that last chain. You can mark the 1st and the 5th stitch in that last chain. So if it's easier, just mark the 5th stitch. That's the last stitch that you just made. And the 1st stitch, just go back 4 stitches and mark this stitch right here. So now I'll tell you why we mark these 2 stitches later. Now we should have 4 chains remaining in the bottom, so we make 4 more single crochets. So now this time we just go under these 2 loops of that single crochet. Just make sure you have enough space to stick your needle in. Maybe a little tight because of the 5 stitches in the previous stitch. If any of your stitch ever is tight, just make sure you have a fat needle nearby. Insert your hook, make space, insert that needle in that space where you need to make the stitch, and then make space for your hook and push your hook through. You'll see that you'll get more space then. So now that completes my 4 single crochets, 4 single crochets and each 1 single crochet in each of those 4 remaining chains. So now for row number 2, we chain once, we turn our work around, and we will make 5 single crochets. So we'll make 1 single crochet into the next 5 stitches. So the 5th stitch is where we have this stitch marker. So now this is what I was going to tell you. So now we have placed these stitch markers on the 5th stitch from this side and the 5th stitch from this side. So every time you work your way from either the stitch marker to this corner, these last 5 stitches will always just have 1 stitch in them. The stitches in between both these stitch markers are our corner stitches, and these 3 stitches actually represent the semicircle of a circle. So we will keep when we're working our way, we will keep increasing it exactly like we would if we were making a circle. So these 3 stitches are just that. If you know how to work a circle, you will already know what I mean by saying these 3 stitches will work like a circle. But if you don't worry about it. I am going to write down what stitches we use where for which row. So now after row number 1, we are going to work our way back into this stitch that we've just made. We are not going to work on the back side of that work. So we chain once, we turn our work around, and from this first single crochet on all the way to where we have the stitch marker, we'll make 1 single crochet each. So we should have a total of 5 single crochets when we make that stitch on that stitch where we have the stitch marker. So now I'm just pulling that stitch marker out for that 5th single crochet, and I'll put the stitch marker back onto that stitch. So we have that stitch marker in place. Now in the next 3 stitches that we have, that is our corner 3 stitches, we are going to make 2 stitches in each of the stitches. So first we insert our hook into the following stitch, pull up a loop and make 1 single crochet. And now since we're going to make 2 single crochets in that same stitch, we go back into that stitch, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. Oops, let me just hide this yarn with that stitch. So that's the second single crochet. So that's 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. Into the next stitch we make 2 single crochets in that stitch. So we just go under both those loops. I'm going to also hide my tail, so that's 1 single crochet. We go back into that same stitch and make the second single crochet in the same stitch. So that's the second time we've done 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Now we go into the third stitch and we make 2 single crochets in that stitch. So that's 1 and 2. So that is our increase for the corner, and our corner is done. Now we should have 5 stitches remaining, where we'll make 1 single crochet each into each of the stitches till we reach the end. Once you, where you have these stitch markers, whenever you make the stitch, make sure you put the stitch marker back onto that stitch. So that is the first of the 5 stitches for me. So now that's our row 2 complete. Now for row 3, we chain once. As per, we work 5 single crochets in the first 5 stitches. So that is 1 single crochet each onto the first onto each of the first 5 stitches. And now for the center corner stitches. We have 6 stitches in the previous row. Now for this row, we only need, every row increases only by 3 stitches in these sections. So in the third row, the first stitch we will make 1 single crochet. Into the second stitch we'll make 2 single crochets, and we will repeat these set of single crochet and 2 single crochets in the same stitch a total of 3 times, which will sit right on top of these 6 stitches. So first we'll go into that first stitch, pull up a loop, make a single crochet. Now we go into the following stitch and we'll make 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So that's 1 and 2. That's 2. Into the following stitch we make 1 single crochet. Then we go into the next stitch, into which we will make 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So now we repeat that single crochet, 1 single crochet in the following stitch and 2 single crochets into the same stitch in the last stitch. So now we will have increased this corner by 3 stitches and also worked into those stitches down there and continued to make that circle. Now we have the flat 5 stitches. I'm just going to pull my stitch marker out and make those stitches. This concludes row number 3. For row number 4, we'll chain once, we'll turn our work around, and we will work 5 single crochets. Now after we work these 5 single crochets, we are going to work into this corner. We are going to increase it with by a total of 3 stitches. So in the previous row we have 9 stitches. We will increase it to a total of 12 stitches. In this row we will make 2 single crochets, that is 1 single crochet into the first 1 single crochet each into the first 2 stitches, and into the third stitch we will make 2 single crochets, and we will repeat this set of 4 stitches for a total of 3 times, which will sit on top of the 9 stitches, and which will increase our stitch to 12. And you can also see that I've written these stitches on top. So first make 1 single crochet and make 1 more single crochet into the next stitch, to the following stitch, that is. So we've made 1 single crochet into the first stitch and 1 single crochet into the second stitch. Now into the third stitch we'll make 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So now that completes 4 stitches total in 3 stitches of the previous row. Now we make 2 single crochets, that is 1 single crochet into the following stitch and 1 single crochet into the next stitch. Now into the stitch after that we make 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Then we make 1 single crochet into the following stitch, 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and into that last available stitch we make 2 single crochets. As you can see, it's very easy to work these stitches. You just have to make sure that you repeat a set of stitches for a total of 3 times. Now once you come to the end of this row, you will have 5 single crochets to end the row. So I'm just going to place my stitch marker back in that stitch. And work 4 more single crochets. Now this completes row number 4. We are going to make a total of 8 rows, and I will write down the exact number of stitches for each of the rows on top. If you understood the pattern of increase in this curve section, please go ahead and make it yourself, because it's very easy. If you don't, no worries, just follow what the written pattern. It's easy because when we were working these 4 rows, I have written the pattern as well, so you can easily follow what I've written with what I've said. So now for ease of understanding, for row number 5 we will make 5 single crochets, after which we will make 3 single crochets, that is 1 single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. So we would have actually made a chain and turned our work around, made 5 single crochets, and then it will say 3 single crochets and then 2 single crochets into the same stitch times 3. So what that means is we make 3 single crochets, that is 1 single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches, that is 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, and 1 single crochet. After that it says 2 single crochets in 1 stitch, so we make 2 single crochets in that 1 stitch. So now that completes 1 set. It asks you to make that 3 times. We made this once. Now if you do that 2 more times, you will have 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, that's 3 single crochets, and then the 4th stitch will have 2 single crochets in the same stitch, then 3 single crochets, that's 1, 2, and 3, and then the 4th stitch you have 2 single crochets in the same stitch, and then after which you have 5 single crochets. So just go ahead and make 5 single crochets, chain ones, flip your work around, and then you'll work your way back. So the same thing, like I said, I've written the rows for you so that you can follow them. Please go ahead and complete the same stitches all the way to row number 8, and I'll meet you guys back once you've completed row number 8. I have just completed the last row, that is the 8th row for the flap. Now what we are going to do is we are going to make a row of single crochets on the top to smooth this edge out so that we can sew this on to the bag later. So now once your 8 rows are done, you can actually pull these stitch markers out. You don't need them anymore. Now to make the base on top, the smooth side on top, we chain once, and we are going to work 1 single crochet into each of these rows. Okay, so now we have 8 rows to the center and 8 rows on this side, so we will have a total of 16 single crochets on the top, which will be equal to the 16 single crochets that we need to sew on to the bag. So that'll be perfect. So now we want to make 1 single crochet in each of the rows. Identify these stitches, just go into any one of the loops. Instead of going into any stitch, I just go into one loop of that stitch and make a single crochet. Now I go into the next stitch, into that bump right there, and pull up a loop and make a single crochet. You continue doing that, just go under one of the loops and grab and make your single crochet. So once you reach, now that's 4, 5, once you complete 8, you would have reached the center of the bag, the flap of the bag. So that's 8. You can see that I've reached the center line. Now we don't make any extra stitch in between. We just go into the next stitch and continue making our single crochets. So you'll have 8 more single crochets till you reach the end. So that's 1, and I'm just going to continue making my single crochets till I reach the end of that side. Now that completes 16 single crochets for me. Now we won't cut this yarn, nor we won't end it at all. What we are going to do is we are going to leave a long tail to sew this flap on to the base of our bag. So the general rule of thumb is when you're trying to sew bags on, you just leave 3 times the length of the flap, or how much ever you're going to stitch. So that's actually going to be the length of this. So I'm just going to leave 3 times the length of the flap, plus little more leeway to so that it's easy for you to actually work with your needle. I'm just going to leave a lot more because the tapestry needle that I'm using is quite long. Now you cut your yarn and pull this loop yarn out. So now this completes your flap. We will sew this on to the back of our pouch. Now that we have the base and the flap of the bag, we will we are going to sew this on, but before that we will mark where this flap, the back straps, need to go onto the backpack, because we are going to sew the back straps along with this flap, right? So first and foremost, we will mark the stitches over here. So the top 3 center stitches, let me just zoom in. Now on this flap, the 3 stitches in between, we had 3 stitches in that center stitch. We are going to skip those 3 stitches and mark 2 stitches down. So this 3 are the center 3 stitches. I'm going to go 1 stitch and the second stitch and mark that stitch right there. Okay, grab another stitch marker and mark the second stitch in the bottom as well. So now in the bottom side you'll have just 1 stitch, which is the center stitch. Then you go to that's the first one and that's the second one, and we mark the second stitch over here. We do the same on the other side. So now we skip these 3 stitches, the 1, 2, 3, then go 1 and 2 and mark that second stitch down there. And in this side that's the center stitch, 1 and 2, that's our second stitch. Just make sure your lobster clasp is on top. Don't make this mistake like I did. I just moved it so you can see clearly. I'm just going to pull it back up and mark my stitches. So now these are the stitches that we're going to mark. These are the spots where the stitches are going to go, and we are going to mark 2 stitches in the base of our bag where we would like the flap to go. So now we find the center of these 2 stitches. So from this side it should be the 7th and 8th stitch, because we have 16 stitches. I'm sorry, it should be the 8th and the 9th stitch from either side. It doesn't matter which side you count. I'm just going to count from this side. So these are the 8th and 9th. This is the 8th and the 9th stitch. I'm not going to mark these. I'm not going to sew the strap onto those stitches. These 2 stitches are just going to be left as is. Now we are going to mark the 2 stitches to the left of the center 2 stitches and 2 stitches to the right of the marked 2 stitches. So now I'm just going to grab this strap. Make sure that your strap is straight and not twisted. Now grab the left side of the strap and mark it on the 2nd stitch. From the center, that's the 2 stitches that are marked. I'm skipping that 1st stitch and marking the center, 2nd one. And now for the center side, just grab that stitch marker and mark that stitchness beside each other, so beside that one. So the center, we are marking the 2 stitches to the left of that center, and we've secured the left side of the strap. We're going to do the same to the right, so I'm just going to skip these 2 stitches in between, and I'm going to mark the 2 stitches after. So I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out because it's just getting cluttery. So I'm going to skip those 2 stitches in between, and I'm going to mark that stitch right there. So instead of, so skip the center 2 stitches and mark that stitch. Oops. It doesn't matter if you just grab 1 loop or 2. You just need to make sure that you have that stitch marker in place, so you know that loop is just going to be used to mark your stitches. So I marked those stitches and I've left the center 2 stitches empty, blank. Now when we sew this on, your back the flap will, when we're sewing the flap on, we'll also sew these straps on, and we can pull these stitch markers out. And as you can see, we have this strap which is loose enough, and we have enough space in the front for the flap to move. If you think you want a longer loop at the back, you can just maybe go down 1 stitch further and attach the flap to the strap. The strap to the base of the bag. I don't think I want it longer, so I've just made it as short as this. Now grab your flap, and we will attach one end to this stitch marker. Now this is the straight side of the flap because this is how we worked our single crochets. The way you work your single crochets is the correct side. That'll make your work actually look neat. Now you just grab your stitch marker that we've marked to the 2 sides of the backpack's base and mark that first single crochet on the top and mark the other side with this stitch marker. So that's where your flap will go, and it will fold. Now make sure, now just grab your tapestry needle, thread it, and I'll show you how to attach all of it. I have threaded my yarn into the tapestry needle, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out of the flap of the bag so that the flap is loose, and you can see what I'm going to do. So now this yarn is coming out of the center of your flap. We are going to work only into the back loops of these single crochets on the flap, that is these loops closer to the bag, and we're going to work into the back loops of the base of the bag, which is these loops right here. So what I'm going to do is, now that the yarn is coming out from the center of the flap, I'm just going to pull this stitch marker out, and into that stitch I'm going to insert my needle from the bottom of that stitch right in between, and I'm going to come up to the front of the bag. Now I'm going to start working my stitches. So I'm going to insert my needle from the top of that first stitch, and I'm going to come out. So once I tighten this, I'm going to come out of that second stitch. So this is the first stitch. I'm going to come out of that second stitch right next to it, from the bottom to the top. In your case, you will tighten your stitch well in advance. I'm just going to leave it a little loose so you can see what I'm doing there. So once I do that, just make sure your stitch is tight. Now you go back into the first stitch of the base from the top to the bottom and come out into that second stitch from bottom to top. So we are going to zigzag into these stitches like so. Now we go into that second stitch of the flap from the top to the bottom and come out of that third stitch right in the center like so. We are going to work zigzag stitches till we reach this stitch mark over here. So now once we worked our our in and out on the base of on the flap of the bag, we do the same on the base. We go back into that same stitch where we did the last where we worked our last stitch. So we go from the top to the bottom of that previous stitch on the base of the bag and come out of the next stitch. So we work into the same stitch twice, and we work in zigzag pattern. Once we work on the base and then once we work on the flap. So now we go back into that stitch on the flap. This is where we had the last stitch. So we go back into that same stitch from the top and we come back out from the next stitch from the bottom to the top. Tighten it, and then we go back into that previous stitch of that on that base of the bag from the top to the bottom, and then come out from the bottom to the top in the next stitch. We'll continue doing this till we reach this stitch over here where we have the stitch marker. As you can see, I have reached the stitch prior to where we have the stitch marker. So now once I've worked this flap, I'm going to work into these stitches over here. So in this previous stitch, I'm going to insert my needle and push my needle back. And when I'm coming back out, I come out of that stitch where we have that stitch marker. So I'm just going to work into that back loop only of that stitch, and I'm going to pull my needle out. This time I'm not going to work into this flap yet. Just leave the stitches as is. So we've just worked one stitch because we're supposed to work twice into that same stitch. We've just worked once. We've come out. Now we go back into that flap and work the stitch in the flap to join the flap to the base. And now this time, now we'll have to work back into these stitches over here. So instead of just working into the stitches on the base of the bag, we pull the stitch marker out and make sure you know which stitch it is. We insert our needle. This is the strap of the bag where we had the stitch marker. I'm just going to insert my needle into under both these loops from the top of that stitch marker. And I'm going to insert my needle into that bottom of that stitch where we were supposed. If we were actually making this stitch, we would have just gone under this stitch and come out of the next stitch. Instead, we are going to work the same stitch but with the strap in between. Put my hook into that needle into that loop where we have the stitch marker, and into that previous stitch, into that stitch where we had that stitch marker. And I'm going to come out. I'm just going to show you how I'm going to come out of that stitch where we have the next stitch marker, leaving the two center stitches. That was a stitch where we had the second stitch marker. I'm just going to pull my needle out of that stitch marker and come out of this space where we have the strap. So to make it easy, I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out and show it to you. So I've come out of that next stitch, and I'm going to insert my needle into this stitch where we have the strap, where we have that stitch mark on that strap, and I'm going to tighten it. Now once I do that, I'm just going to insert my needle. Oops, too many things over there. Insert my needle from the bottom. So just push your needle from this side to the other side. I'm not going through anything. I'm just making sure that my needle is it comes to the back of the work So once you've gotten your stitch, just make sure that the yarn goes to the back of that strap. And now we will work the stitches on the flap of the bag. So just pull into that stitch, come out of the next stitch, and make sure you tighten your stitches. And now I'm going to go back into that stitch where we had that stitch marker, the second stitch marker. You might find it difficult to find, but just move your strap a little, wriggle it around, and you'll get the right spot. And then you come out of the next stitch, and tighten it, and work your flap. You have the two stitches, you have the two empty stitches, the middle stitches, and then you will work the straps in between over here, these two stitches where we've marked it, exactly like we did this side. So just make sure you sew them on properly. If you find this method of sewing difficult, don't worry about it. Just grab another set of grab a yarn and sew this on separately. I just don't like too many yarns, so I'm sewing it on like this. But yeah, I think it's fairly easy. Just make sure you go back and see how it is. You can sew it on however it is. It really won't be visible as much as you would think, and it also secures the yarn. So now just continue doing the same kind of stitches till you reach the end, and tie a knot and end your work. That should complete the bag. I'll show you how it looks once I've completed sewing the flap to the base of the bag. I have sewed on the piece all the way to the end, and once I've reached the last stitch, you will notice that you will just have one, you would have worked into that stitch just once. So what I like to do is I just like to go, once I come out, if I've come out of the base, I just like to go back into the last two stitches and make a stitch so that it kind of feels complete, and that completes the pouch. Let me just, that completes how the stitch looks. Now just make sure you've sew this on, make a knot and just make a knot and weave your tail in. I'm just making a single knot for now to show you how the bag looks. So let me just zoom out and show you how the flap looks. So now this is how the bag will look once you sew it on. Just put the flap on like so, and your bag is complete. I'm going to attach the button, the magnet button, to the flap over here. So make sure there are 4 stitches on the side of the bag of the flap, which actually is there so that it covers the 4 stitches on the side of the bag, and after which you'll have this flap over here like so. So just make sure you sew the button on over here. If you would like, you can always make a loop and put a button in the bottom so you can put the loop over the button, but I'm just going to attach this magnet button to the flap over here. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to attach an embellishment on top, and I will show you the final look of the bag. Now here is the final look of the bag. As you can see, I have sewed it on, and the back, the straps are sewed on. Of course, if you didn't sew it on like I did along with the flap, you could have sewed it on separately, but I have sewed it on like so, and I've also attached the buttons. So what I've done is the lower part of the button I've attached to the top, the top few stitches, while this button right here, when you fold this flap, you need to leave a minimum of 4 stitches on the side. I have 5 and 6, I think. If you leave a little more, you just have this backpack just jutting the flaps jutting out, which kind of gives that pretty cute look. So I've put the button of the top button maybe 2 rows below, so in between, and I just added a little embellishment to make it look pretty, and it looks very much like a backpack. I can put my hands in that strap and just hold on to the bag in my palms, or probably just hang this around my jeans loop, pant loops, or my bag, and you can see it's really comfortable. I do hope you liked the tutorial, and if you did, please leave us a thumbs up. It means the world to us and helps us reach more people. And if you had any comments, please leave them in the comments box below. I'll see you in our next video. Until then, happy crocheting.